Hi, this is Dan
And Tom.
from SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Today we're going to talk about the posters from the James Bond movies from the 1960s, from Dr. No through On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And we have with us a special guest to help us out. Graham Rye from 007 Magazine, the online source for all James Bond. Graham, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Our first spy movie podcast episode was on the James Bond movie Dr. No. And in that episode, we talked about the importance of the poster from that movie, and we had Reno Lovison come in, join us for that discussion. We looked back at that and decided we're going to do a series of episodes on the movie posters in depth. And so we're going to start here, and we thought, who knows a lot about James Bond and print and all of that stuff? And Graham, you started 007 Magazine. I can't think of a better person to bring in for this.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very flattering, fellas. Thank you very much indeed.
That's true.
Yeah, you've been doing it for 40 years. You know a lot of stuff, and your website is terrific. All right. Over the series, we will look at how the posters have changed over the decades to give us a grounding for analyzing them in detail. The depiction of sex and sexuality in James Bond movie posters has evolved significantly over the decades, often reflecting societal attitudes, of course, and marketing trends of their respective eras. Here's a look at how sexuality has been presented in these iconic posters. Today, we're going to look at the posters from the 1960s James Bond movies. So, here's what the posters are going to be looking like in the 60s. We have to look at movie posters as a phenomenon of the media. Graham, tell us about how and why posters were made, where and how they were intended to be used, and the big company that put these out in the early days, the National Screen Service, I think you have on your website. You know, there's so many different aspects to these posters, the sizes, the inserts, the door panel things, all the stuff they did. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how long you've been doing this and all that?
Well, basically, I've been publishing 007 magazine for just over 40 years, and I've obviously I was involved in collecting material from 1962 when I saw the first Bond film. But when it comes to producing posters for films, you've got to get your product out there. You've got to get people to see what you're going to be, playing in the cinema or the theatre the next week, the next month, or whatever it is. And in the 60s, when movies were battling against television, they had to up their game. When Dr. No was released, it was always intended to be the first of a series, but nobody ever really knew how successful Dr. No might be. It was promoted as the first James Bond film, leading people to believe there's going to be some more. But they needed to pull people in. So obviously they needed to have some really eye-catching graphics on the posters. And at that time, an American illustrator, Mitchell Hooks, who'd been working after the war, he came to New York and he started his freelance work. When people in advertising and publishing and the film business saw the quality of his work and how graphic and how different and how alive it was, they knew, we want that man doing our work for this client or whatever. So when David Chasman at United Artists started to put the campaign together, I think Hooks was the first man that he contacted because he'd seen other work that he'd done. He'd illustrated, I think he did Guns of Navarone, Gigi, Two for the Seesaw, the same year as Dr. No. There's quite a few. One of the best ones of all he ever did, for me, I love it. It's Lord Jim, Peter O'Toole.
Okay.
He's got a lot of these very small line drawings of the characters and scenes happening in that film, and he did the same thing with Dr. No. He did these wonderful line drawings, which we used. I'm looking at it now, which we used on the American poster, but were barely used on the English quad because you had two different design teams. America, basically, United Artists looked after the overall campaign of Dr. No, and they knew what they wanted. And they had discussions. Harry Saltzman was very involved in it with David Chasman and Mitchell Hooks. And basically, when the major artwork, which is Bond with the Girls, came over to the UK, the National Screen Service looked at it and put together something that was different to the American campaign completely. It was using basically the same artwork, but in a very totally different way, much more colourful way. I have to say, I suppose I'm biased, but I do prefer it. I do prefer it. I don't like those duotones, the colours over the girls and Bond on those American posters. It kind of knocks back um, the the sharpness and the graphic feel of Mitchell Hook's original drawings. And because the other thing as well is that the American poster, the illustrations of Mitchell Hook's, they are slightly censored because you'll notice that Ursula Andress Honey's bikini is considerably larger. It's covering her navel, like all of the American press photographs at the time. They were all retouched very crudely, actually. With the retouchers used to use a gouache paint, and they would literally paint white paint over over the top, so and cover up the navel. You couldn't show navels.
Yeah, wow. What? Wow.
Things
Those
have
were the
changed.
days. Yeah, things have changed a little.
That was the case in not only in America, but in Australia, who were even more conservative as a country, you know. And there's one spread I've got on file here somewhere from an Australian film magazine from 1965 that's got all the Bond girls in Margaret Nolan in her bikini, or just in her bikini, and various other girls. And all of these photographs have all been doctored so that the cleavage and everything's,
Wow.
they could be nuns, really, Yeah.
The Barbie doll effect.
We don't see too many nuns on the Bond posters, but that'd be good.
But when it was when they were going to launch Doctor No, it was very important for United Artists, and it was even more important for Harry and Cubby that they wanted to make this really work. So they really pulled out all the stops, and that's why they used Mitchell Hooks. Because when you look at his other work preceding 1962 and during the rest of the 60s and such like, it's just you look at it and you know immediately that it's Mitchell Hooks. So they started off with exactly the right artist, and that combination of Bond looking very cool with a cigarette smoking in one hand and a gun over, like like a real I couldn't care less attitude about him with this array of beautiful women behind him. It was everybody the right kind of message that this is going to be sexy, violent, and great fun.
Yeah, we're going to look at that right now because the 1960s posters were really the classic seduction posters. But like you're saying, a lot of them were doctored up because of the laws at the time. But the posters, really, the early Bond films like Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, all that, they heavily emphasized Bond's allure and the beauty of his female co-stars. And the imagery they use, women were often depicted in sultry poses, even though they were doctored up a little bit, like you were saying, Graham, wearing revealing outfits of bikinis or highlighting Bond's status as this wonderful, suave ladies' man.
Mm.
And the message really for these posters, it sold the fantasy of Bond, which
It
was amazing to be able to do this in a poster to get this whole thing running and rolling, to sell Bond really here in the posters as this fantasy. And he's both a hero, a playboy. He's surrounded by Bond girls and now Bond women
Yeah.
who embody this glamour and the seduction of all this. So it's pretty wild. And the artists, like you were talking about, who did these posters, I mean, that was art. That was beautiful, fascinating artwork in the early posters. Much better, I think, than the posters we see now. Wow.
Undoubtedly, I mean, far superior. There's no real imagination in photo montage in Photoshop. I just wish that somebody would get themselves a decent art director for some of these newer, not just Bond, other films as well, and
Yeah.
get some illustration back on there because they tell you it in an exaggerated, slightly unreal fashion. But there's something about the human brain picks up on that sort of stuff, and it's more exciting to see a
Yes.
montage of the three main actors' faces in the middle of a poster. Okay, so they want to tell people it's Brad Pitt, Anthony Hopkins, or whoever
Yes.
as a group. But once you've seen their name, and most people know who they're going to go and see anyway. But the idea of those three faces, because they're great faces, being illustrated by a top illustrator and lit in a
Yes.
certain way, you can't beat that. You can't
Yeah.
beat.
Yeah. You can't.
Well, I think it adds to the fantasy of it all, right? It's
does.
Well, yeah, that's the whole key, right?
because it's not the realistic, it's not the photo, it's the how do we take that photo and adapt it to art.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah, they're creating this world in this
cinema
poster.
cinema is all about artifice anyway. So therefore, I think film advertising should reflect that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
when you talk about the advertising in the UK and in the US, they did things different, and
yeah.
there's all these different sizes. So, when we talk to collectors and they talk about, oh, I've got this quad or I've got whatever, they're different in the US and the UK. Do you know if there's what the reason behind that is? Why things are different sized and stuff?
I don't know the total technicality of it, but I think it's down to American paper sizes
Mhm.
and British paper sizes are
Okay.
different. So
Okay.
therefore, something has to be designed to fit, the actual paper. It's trimmed to a set size, like A4 is. I think A4 is probably the same in America, but the different paper sizes going up in size A3, A1.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's it's down to the technical printing of the print sizes, the paper sizes. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, because they
But,
had all
but,
kinds of
but
different sizes, right? The British
yeah,
quad, the American one sheet, whatever. And they're
yeah.
all
Well,
different
the
sizes.
thing the thing is, the American one sheet posters have always been one sheet uprights,
Yes,
which
right. Vertical.
I've never particularly liked. Now I don't know whether that's because probably, and this may be the case, all of the cinemas, theaters in America, their display units were
Yes.
vertical.
Yes.
That probably was the reason, because the vertical display unit came first many years ago, probably from possibly the 20s, 30s even. I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, but over here, because we're different, dear. It's landscape, and I just think a landscape poster makes for um, a better design factor. I mean, okay, my magazine obviously is A4 and it's an upright size. For a magazine, that works, But
Hmm.
if you want to get a really panoramic, really in your face image, I think landscape proportions work better, which is, again, I think probably uh, all of the display cases at the cinemas in the UK had almost certainly been landscape. So that's why when National Screen got their hands on the Bond campaigns, obviously they ran as per normal with a landscape format.
Yeah. All right, we're going to look at Dr. No now in the first Bond movie and the poster. It's going to be a horizontal poster, just like you said. And Mitchell Hooks is the guy. So we're examining the British quad landscape poster. The artist illustrator for this poster was Mitchell Hooks, as you mentioned, and
Yep.
the design is by David Chasman. It was released in October of 1962. Here we see James Bond on the poster, and Dr. No is half off the poster to the left, and that's kind of detailing who is going to be in control and who is going to be more powerful. So it's saying all of this in this poster
Yeah.
that you can just look at and say, hey, yeah, it's a nice poster. But when you start examining what's in the poster, it's amazing. The
It's
illustration of Bond by Mitchell Hooks, like you were just saying, Graham, it's tremendous. It's showing Bond with his right arm over his left knee, holding a gun, smoking a cigarette. It's his left arm, with the cigarette and so on. I love this poster. It's one of my all-time favorite Bond
mm,
posters. It's
mm.
fantastic. It's been used all over the world. You can look at this poster 50 times and not see the smoking gun. The smoking gun has that little trail of smoke coming up.
Yeah, it's
It's
lovely.
just right. It's fantastic. I've looked at it 50 times and it's like, oh my God, it has
And
that little.
it runs up Honey's left leg as well.
Yep.
Yeah. It's fantastic when you start examining these things. And it depicts Bond as a spy of action
Mm.
and in action with danger.
When you talked about Mitchell Hooks, the American or the English soundtrack album, which didn't for Doctor No, which didn't come out until 1965, wasn't released until 65. Um, on the back of it, it's got a photo illustration
Mm.
and some of Mitchell Hook's very fine line drawings, which are superb. But if you look at that photograph, you'll see it's a composite. The head of Connery has been taken from another photograph and
Mm.
montaged. I mean,
Wow.
it's done
Really?
very well. I'm just telling you that's how it's done. But the point is, I've never found any photograph yet that proves Connery posed for the body shot holding the gun and the
Oh,
cigarette.
wow.
So
Yeah.
so
Wow.
it's either somebody else modeling that which could be possible, or it obviously could be Connery but different headshot. Maybe out there somewhere. But if you look at the illustration on the Doctor No UK quad, and you look at his face,
Hmm.
that to me has always looked as though that is Connery posing for a photograph.
Yeah.
Right now, if you look at the one on the back of the LP album, you'll see that the actual physical pose is identical, but the head is very, very different. That's
Hmm.
why that's why I've always thought that that's a head montage shot, and
Oh, jeez.
they've used a black and white shot that was taken. It's because it's used on the Goldfinger 3 sheet as well. That head
Hmm.
shot that's covering the Golden Girl's bum, right? That's a
Hmm.
that's a coloured up black and white, and the hand from down there has been cut and montage so it's close to his face. So what I'm saying is that the one on the back of the album, which I don't think was ever used on any of the posters. That photographic image.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
the headshot is a definite shot that was taken of Connery for Doctor No. I've got it amongst all the different shots I've got from, and you can but you lay the two together, and you can see that's what the artist, or well, that's what they've used rather to montage onto that body, because in the photograph he's got this look on his face, and he's obviously raised his eyebrow and he's posed his face in such a particular way. It's really like more like the image on the From Russia with Love quad. It's
Hmm.
more like what a severe looking James Bond look. Whereas the
Mhm.
one in the Doctor No quad, he's smiling. He looks a bit on the friendly side, and I think possibly they probably thought he didn't look ruthless enough. So
Yeah.
that's why they changed it in other ones going on.
Okay.
Anyway, have a look for yourself. Anyway, going back to Doctor No himself, whosever idea it was just to show that half of Doctor No on the side of the
Yes.
poster. It was very, very clever because
Brilliant.
that's how the character more or less appears in the film. You sense him throughout the film. You hear his
Yes.
voice. People do his bidding here, there, and everywhere, but you don't ever see him right until the last part of the film. And
Yes.
it really does, you know,
It's about halfway through.
Yeah, and it looks like he's watching over everything here.
yeah,
Because it got him kind of back a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's I just think that's really clever.
I think it had a great impact on the Bond franchise right off the bat, just with this poster.
Yeah.
It's
And
amazing.
the other important thing to mention about this is something that some people seem to get wrong in some reason, for some reason or other. Well, because they don't know, I suppose. The 007 and gun logo on the UK quad is designed by National Screen UK. Somebody in their art department designed that. And basically, it's an adaptation of a logo that Pan Books used inside their books. So they've
Oh,
lifted the idea and then they just changed it to work on that quad poster. It's not the 007 007 logo and gun
no.
that Joe Croft designed. That's the one that's used on the American first poster.
Right.
And very strangely, that 007 and gun logo didn't didn't feature on the quads for the Bond films until
Right.
on the Secret Service.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
I was going to
Right.
ask you about that because it's like where'd that
So,
it's like you paid Joe to do the logo.
yeah.
You've got it in the US posters.
Yeah.
Why is it not on the UK poster?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, continue with this poster. We talked about Dr. No being half off the poster and Bond, but you got the four women in this poster too. I
Yeah.
mean, again, Dr. No, first movie, and you have Honey Rider, Ursula Andress, of course, Miss Taro, Donna
Yeah.
Marshall, Sylvia Trench, Eunice Gayson, and the Annabelle Chung, who was the photographer, played by Margaret Loire.
When Mitchell Hooks illustrated those girls for the Doctor No poster, he had 10-8 black and white photographs to go by.
Ah,
So he's put the color in himself. But obviously Ursula Andress, there's a set still of that one. The girl, obviously, with the the towel around her backside is supposed to be Miss Taro.
Hmm.
Eunice Gayson, obviously in the shirt,
Yeah.
and the one that's supposed to be Annabelle Chung.
Yeah.
The body actually is he's used a still of Zena Marshall in that Chong San that you see her in the filming, and
Yeah.
just change the head so it doesn't look so much like her.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah,
Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, and I love how they the stark contrast with that bright yellow background just immediately just grabs you.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
The
you know,
colors were fantastic, right? And you
if
can see some of them are going to be reused again in future posters. But here with the women and so on, you got all these four women on there, and you know, in one way or another, James Bond has them all or gets the better of them all in the movie, at least. And, Honey Ryder, he develops a relationship with her and he saves her at the end. Sylvia Trench will appear again in From Russia with Love as a
Yeah.
love interest for Bond. Miss Tarot, though the enemy, is conquered by Bond at her apartment before he kills Professor Dent. Between the smoking gun and the women, the poster sets the bar and tells us what Bond will be like: tough with a gun, action, the smoke coming up the gun, and involved in many ways with women. So there is a lot in this single poster.
I mean, I
Fantastic.
love the yellow on that first poster, and
Yes.
that's one of the reasons I use the same yellow on the 007 magazine website.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's got to be one of the most famous posters of any Bond movie.
I don't live in the UK, but I hear that there's a lot of rainy days and a lot of cloudy days, and having that bright yellow is just gonna pop as
Yeah,
you're
you're right.
riding by on a bus or something.
You're right. You're
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean there is a variation of this poster I think that does have the 007 logo designed by Joe Karoff, but and we interviewed him, so you guys could check out
Yeah,
the interview
the
out too. He's fascinating.
US versions have
Yeah,
Karoff's logo.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
his logo appeared in the Doctor No campaign from and
You,
appeared in the James Bond posters from Doctor No onwards straight away.
yeah,
1960,
yeah, yeah.
well, 1963 when it came out in America, uh,
Right.
straight
Now,
away. But
th- they used pieces of this poster too in other Dr. No posters, right? For example, James Bond, as we described him with the smoking gun and the cigarette, he's used on other Dr. No posters, which is kind of fascinating. But Graham, they did this often, didn't they? They'll take a section of a great poster and use it in another sized poster.
they would only use that Doctor No imagery on other Doctor No posters
Yes.
that were different formats.
Yeah.
There were show cards, uh, smaller versions on it of it were used on the lobby cards. So it's a case of once you've got your master images, you then adapt those to fit whatever area you're going to need to fill.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm.
and did they do door panels too? They had subway posters. They had door panel posters. Sometimes the door panel posters I've seen where they like will have like four different movies on a four different door panel posters together as a group.
I don't think they started doing door panels in the States until Goldfinger, though.
Yeah,
I
okay.
don't remember seeing any for Doctor No from Rush with Love.
Oh yeah, not from no, but yeah, the different formats they use in those posters, and they were tremendously effective because at the time, TV was not, you had it, but you're seeing these color posters in the theaters, outside the theaters. Sometimes they use them outside the theaters too, and it just sucked you in. It just brought you in. All right,
And
I think it's
the
good for.
thing that amazes me is way back then, nobody knew this was going to be a collectible thing.
Yeah,
Right?
man.
So most of this stuff just got tossed, right? So
I
it
wish I had half the toys my mother threw out.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's like we collect Disney animation cells, and they washed a lot of those cells off and
Oh
reused
my
the
God.
acetate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it when you look at the collectible market here, this is a huge collectible market now. But way back then, they did all of this work, and it just ended up in a landfill somewhere.
Mm.
yeah. All
Very
right,
true.
let's move on to From Russia with Love, 1963. We're diving into this British quad sheet, which is one of the most popular From Russia with Love posters. This poster is so well conceived, it includes key elements graphically from the movie. It's actually a clever, clever poster. It's another beautiful work of art. The artist illustrators here are Renato Frattini and Eric Pulford. Now, Eric Pulford did the image of Bond here.
So now you say he did the image of Bond, but if you look at that, his face It's almost identical to that first poster. And remember, this is
Yeah,
artwork, it's not a photo. And
yeah,
you look at it, it is amazing how spot on that is
yeah, yeah,
from
yeah,
the first poster. And
yeah.
I mean, this thing has, I mean, it's got so much in it. You've got the Eye of Sophia Mosque, the helicopter, the truck stopped on the train tracks,
Yeah.
and, the gypsy camp fight, and of
It's
course,
amazing.
we get the women. We've got Daniela Bianchi posing seductively, which is a very
Yes.
common thing in these posters.
Yeah.
So again, Bond's the largest character, and he's looking straight at us with his gun raised. That's that smirky, confident smile he gets going. And of course, in a tux, because all spies wear tuxes.
Yeah, yeah. And
So
black and red again.
yeah,
We have black and red here becoming
It,
the spy colors with yellow thrown in as well here. And of course, our website is all black and red. So there you go.
by the way, the illustrations on that poster, all of those illustrations are all by Renato Frattini.
Yeah,
right.
fantastic.
The actual composition and the design of the poster was by Eric Pulford.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And
So
one of
Pulford
the
did the art, the design, and the actual artwork
Layout.
itself. Frattini did. Okay.
yeah, one of well the it's unique in so much that it's the only poster where the artist is actually credited on the poster. His name is
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
name is on the
That's
poster.
rare, right?
It's very
Yeah.
rare, and I can only imagine it was something to do with a contractual agreement because
Hmm.
they certainly wouldn't have done it just for the sake of it. Um, I would imagine that Frattini, who was really, he was a wonderful, wonderful artist. He was starting to get bigger, and people wanted his artwork more and more and more. So he may well have said, "Well, look, in part of the contract, you're going to pay me whatever you're going to pay me, but I want my name on this poster," because he was obviously very proud of it, and as he
Yeah,
should, because it's a magnificent illustration.
it
Uh,
is.
it's not quite Sean Connery. It's a caricature, really, in its illustrative style of what Connery appeared to be Bond to most people. But
Hmm.
it's a very it's a wonderfully creative image, which it's so strong and so powerful. It's lasted all down the years, and it's been used over and over again on other season things and everything under the sun. And I love it. It's my favorite of all of them. The Doctor No
Wow.
one's is great. It's lovely, but there's just something about that illustration of Bond and the graphics as well, and the other imagery of the girls. It's 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 as in, I look at that and I see that as a piece of as important piece of art as anything that Picasso
Wow.
or Van Gogh ever did.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah,
That's
it is
that's
fantastic. It is fantastic. I mean, most of the time we look at a poster, we look for 5 seconds at a poster. Yeah, that's a pretty cool poster. But when we're doing what we're doing now, and you
Mm.
start looking at these images and what they do, the image here of Bond looking straight ahead, his arms crossed, and everything, his cufflinks showing, and of course, this From Russia with Love poster was put in many different languages for the world market as well. It's just awesome what these artists did and what
Yeah.
they accomplished and what was communicated to anyone looking at this poster for more than 5 seconds. It's just amazing.
And by now, the UK national screen were were partly in charge of the British campaigns now. There was an advertising agency in the West End of London called Downtown Pulford. I remember it because when I was a messenger boy, I worked at an advertising commercial artist business, and I had to deliver parcels and such like that. And there were different bits and pieces of James Bond artwork lying around every now and again. And I just missed bumping in and meeting Robert Brownjohn by 5 minutes.
oh,
I asked about him. He said, and I remember the guy saying, "Oh, blimey," he said, he put, he only left 5 minutes ago. If only you'd have been a bit earlier. That's my
uh,
fault. I'm always late."
Jeez. Yeah. Now, there was an American poster too from Russia with Love that kind of told more of a story because it included multiple photographs from the
I don't,
movie
I don't.
and taglines.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a little different. That was a vertical poster, like you were saying, Graham, before. But it included the same type of elements, though: women, guns, some sexy scenes and so on. And one of the U.S. posters that we're taking a look at here was designed by David Chapman, who did the work on some of the Doctor No posters. And his taglines like "Meet James Bond," his new incredible women, his new incredible enemies, his new incredible adventure. It was kind of like telling us a story with words and also with the picture. So it kind of morphed a little bit from the original poster we were talking about earlier. So we have a version here of the American one sheet poster and there was with a Lebanese market, and you could see how clever they were in depicting
Yep.
James Bond's allure and the
Yep.
beauty of women he'll encounter in all of these posters from all translated from all the languages, posters for all over the world. It's just unbelievable what they did with
Mm.
with these posters to communicate what they wanted to communicate succinctly.
Mm.
Whew.
Well, and what I kind of like there is that they're different styles. So like the quad on where it says James Bond is back. So Graham, you talked about the fact that they didn't know, they wanted this to become a series, but they didn't know what it was going to be. So that poster is just boom, he's back.
Back,
The
yeah.
US posters that Dan was just talking about was less about him being back, but it's meet all this is other stuff
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Mm.
where the message from the UK poster is really, hey, he's back and there's something about Russia here.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
forget, For Russia With Love didn't open in America until 1964.
Right.
So
Right.
America was hit double in 64 with From Russia With Love and Goldfinger. So, you didn't
Yes.
stand a chance.
Yeah. All right. All right. Let's look at Goldfinger. Now you mentioned Goldfinger. I mean, Goldfinger not only created the formula for the remaining James Bond movies with cars and gadgets and the whole storyline concept,
Yeah.
but it set a very high bar with its posters as well. There are too many great Goldfinger posters, but we're going to only look at a couple here. And one is the British Quad, which has a woman painted in gold with eyes closed on the left and an overlay of James Bond with one arm around Pussy Galore and the other pointing a pistol all over the left breast of the woman. It's wow. The design is by Robert Brownjohn, who you said you just missed meeting, Graham. Uh, and
Yeah,
it is magnificent. It
it
was
is.
released in September of 1964.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on this American one we're talking about here, they use a different color here. You got pumpkin orange, right, for the James Bond back in action. That's big and bold. In the same color, Sean Connery as James Bond, 007. Goldfinger in this poster is in
Yeah.
white, and the other stars are in a darker orange. Well, gold dominates, of course, the poster.
The whole idea is the whole idea is to use as much warm color as can be used to make it look as gold as possible. And
Yeah.
the other reason as well, Margaret Nolan painted in gold has got her eyes closed because she's supposed to be dead.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. Good. Yeah. And it does. The gold dominates the poster, as we were saying. And we're drawn into it really with the images of Bond and Pussy Galore. It's kind of an uncomplex poster in a way. It's kind of a simple poster.
It
No
is.
real movie scenes shown here. No
Mm.
actual images of Goldfinger himself, just Bond and Pussy. And now it kind of tells part of the story nonetheless. Bond and Pussy Galore, starting out as enemies, are here embraced. So you
Mm.
see this in the poster. They're embraced as her hand is on his chest. That's a sign of kind of protect me, and
Yeah.
it's asserting her presence and confidence in the situation they're in. This is all in the poster. Clearly in this picture, she's on Bond's side here, literally and figuratively.
One
But
one of my holy grails has
it,
always been to find those photographs of Connery
yes,
and Blackman that Robert Brownjohn used to project onto Margaret Nolan's body.
yes, that would be
That
fantastic.
would be fantastic.
Because there it was done as a session with him and her together, also him on his own. I've got one shot that I used in my Goldfinger portfolio, which I used in the advertising for it as well, of Connery in the same jacket, the suit he wears at Auric Stud,
Yeah,
just pointing a gun at the camera. So I know there's a series of shots photographed by I don't know who, uh,
yes.
but I'm hoping that it's tucked away somewhere still in the back of somebody's drawer, and one day they're going to come out.
Yeah, yeah, that would be fantastic. Find. Yeah,
I was
another favorite of the posters from Goldfinger is the U.S. one sheet, which is cool. That was designed by David Chapman and Robert Brownjohn.
Yeah.
Robert Brownjohn again. The color theme here continues with the yellows and, like you're saying,
Yeah.
the soft colors there, Graham, and so on, and some blacks and oranges. But
Mm.
here we see three small images of Bond that separate, and it separates the main theme of the poster with the golden girl sprawled horizontally across the middle of the poster. I mean, that was very dramatic, very
Mm.
cool. And James
That's
Bond, of
Margaret.
course.
By the way, that's Margaret Nolan again.
Yeah,
Right.
Margaret Nolan, right? Yeah. James Bond back in action. Everything he touches turns to excitement. Of
Mm.
course, the play on the old word, everything he touches turns to gold. With Goldfinger is in white again and again. No
Mm.
image of Goldfinger himself here in the posters. It's pretty amazing, right? It's like pretty cool.
It's a very both campaigns, the English and the American, are both because Brown John was such a clever designer.
Yes.
He was probably the cleverest designer ever used on the Bond posters when it comes to the actual physical design of the poster. His visual ability was off kilter. He saw things in a totally different way, and
Yes.
nobody could really match what he did. I think that From Russia with Love and Goldfinger were really stand out because they're both obviously totally Brown John, and I think those two were enough. I think if you'd have seen that idea used as much as Morris's titles were, which were lovely, but it would have become blasé and a little bit boring, you know.
Mm.
But that's why those two films stand out
Yeah,
to
yeah,
me,
yeah. Yeah,
visually.
and again, there's so many great
That's
Goldfinger posters.
that's why those UK quads were designed the way they were, because as soon as the producers saw what Brown John had come up with for the actual titles, it made sense to follow that through onto all of the hoardings in the UK. And they looked, I mean, some of those posters were massive. I mean,
Yeah.
you imagine walking down Shaftesbury Avenue in the West End of London, and there in the distance is this gigantic golden woman, you
Yeah.
know, and you think, what the hell is that, you know? And obviously, the closer you get to it, you start to understand what it's all about. But the other thing is as well, when From Russia with Love opened at the Odeon Leicester Square, word of mouth from Doctor No the year before created such an interest. The queues round the block, and they went all the way around the block and
Wow.
joined in
Yeah.
the other side. You know, you'd never see that. You would never see that today. It just doesn't.
No. No.
But
No.
you know, but the idea that this was happening in 1963 in the West End of London, again, all of these pictures are all illustrated on the 007 magazine website. When you look at those pictures, you think, wow, you know, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that it is unbelievable.
It affected people in such a deep psychologically rooted way because it was the absolute ideal fantasy character. Every man, after seeing those films, wanted to be James Bond, right? For all
Yes.
for all kinds of reasons, you
Yep.
know. And a lot of women wanted to meet a man like that who was completely in control and knew what he was up to.
Yep.
Yes. There you
Well, and
go.
another thing with this quad too is that it's that stark black background
Hmm.
with the gold images and lettering and all that stuff on top of it. And it's kind of a contrast to that first poster we talked about, which was here's the bright yellow. Now it's here's this big black thing with all this yellow and orange on it, kind of giving me this whole gold
It's
feel.
it's
And that
it's
really
running
makes that pop.
it's running parallel to what happened, you know, what he did with the credit title. That's why he got the dark background. But
Yeah.
and then um, the UK campaign for Ireland, the other quad that they use, which is Style B, which is the golden hand
Hmm.
with
Yes.
on a black man. That's because that amount of female flesh, even though it's painted in gold, was a bit too much for the Roman Catholics. So
Wow. Wow.
that's why they use that. A lot of the other posters in Ireland as well. You've probably seen pictures of them on the internet. So they were never printed like you see it. Somebody, one of the cinema managers or assistants or whatever, got a large black magic marker and painted and just drew over the top of the image of Ursula or whoever, so it looks like they're wearing a completely black outfit. You know, no cleavage, no cleavage, please. No upper thigh. We've got to, you know, that'll.
It's amazing.
A woman can't look like a woman. Okay.
No, no, well, no, not in those days. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
All
So
right.
now, Dan, you mentioned the fact that we don't see Goldfinger in the quad, but the
Mhm.
S3 sheet does have an image of Goldfinger here. So in the first poster we talked about, we see the villain in the background. In From Russia with Love, we don't see the villain.
Right.
Here, we only see the villain in the US3 sheet that brings him in. And so, it's a very different style poster they did here. I mean, it's really a compilation of elements that we see. And then there's a couple of images of Goldfinger, including the one with Bond on the laser table. Now,
Yeah.
somebody just coming to this that doesn't know that scene, you're gonna have no idea what you're looking at there because lasers were so brand new at that time that you don't know what it is, but you see Bond's tied down on a table.
Mhm.
So I think it's a nice reveal in the poster. And then once you see it in action, it's like, whoa, that's what that thing was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this poster is different because you're showing you images from the movie and kind of almost telling you a story of, hey, some of these things are going to happen in the movie, which we didn't see before. And now you're seeing it here. It was an interesting concept and it works because it's intriguing. You're looking at these things like you're saying, the laser, what the heck is that? So very nice. Very nice.
And another thing, Dan, you talked about, and we've talked about this in other episodes as well, is you don't get to see the gold butt on the gold
No,
model,
you
right?
don't see the gold,
So
but
Margaret Nolan, she's covered, so she's obscured. Like in the movie, there's a pillow blocking, right?
I've got the original shot on file, and she was completely naked
Yeah,
when Robert Brown John took that shot.
yeah.
yeah. The pillow strategically placed, and Sean Connery's head in the three sheet. You have gold. You have James Bond's head cleverly covering her butt. So that's
But other
which
things,
is cool.
they include some of the other characters. So Odd Job's there in the
Yeah,
three
yeah,
sheet. Jill Masterson's there, and like we said, Goldfinger's there. So
yeah,
it's actually pretty cool to see how different mediums of poster work had to be treated differently based on the audience it was going to.
yeah. All right, let's move on to Thunderball, 1965. Hey, it's one of my favorite movies. I love this because it was so different. Again, Thunderball. Now, personally, I love the plot of this story because it's so believable that nuclear weapons could get stolen. I mean, the U.S. in real life lost a couple of nuclear weapons off the east coast of the United States once. So, can it
Oops.
happen? Yeah. Look at the first one we're going to look at is British Quad. That has Bond in his orange wet jacket, a flipper, and a spear gun surrounded by four women, of course, two on each side, dressed in either bikinis or a sexy one-piece suit. The artist illustrator here is Robert McGuinness, and this one was released in December 1965. So back to black and red again in this particular poster. These are graphics, and we see "Look Out" with 007 logo incorporated, and here comes the biggest Bond of all. Well, budget wise, it certainly was the biggest Bond of all. It was $9 million budget, triple what the Goldfinger budget was. So that was pretty wild. And it tells a nautical story, as well as we know this will be a movie about water. One woman is kneeling, facing Bond, and has a hand raised as she is unzipping his wetsuit jacket. All are in bikinis and in the one piece. And wow, now we know sex is coming as well as water.
Well, and I also
I
like
mean,
they did a different twist on the 007 logo here because they made it part of the word look. So it's not
yes.
Karoff's again. So we still haven't seen Karoff's in the
That's clever.
quads,
It's very clever. I like
but
that.
it's a very good use of
Yeah.
the 007 as they did that. So I really
Yeah.
like that. Now another poster with Robert McGuinness and Frank McCarthy tells a bigger story about the movie. There's three graphic panels running across the top of the poster. One with Bond in his jetpack, which is technically a Bell rocket belt,
Yeah.
with the words "Look up." Okay, this does make sense. Bond does fly this
Mhm.
rocket belt and looking up because that's where he is.
Yep.
But it's also revealing a gadget, a big one, and like in the Goldfinger one where they show him on the table with the laser. If you saw that thing, you really have no idea what the hell you're looking at
Yeah.
until you see the pre-title
Intriguing.
and you
Intriguing.
see what's actually happening there. So I think that's really nice because it's giving you a little taste whetting your appetite a little bit, but you still have no idea what you're looking at until you actually
Right.
see it. Right. Now the middle panel says, we had look up, now we're in
Yep.
the middle, so let's look down. And it's Bond in the water. We've got, fighting frogmen. He's got his scuba tasks. He has scuba tanks, but no mask. I mean, is
Yeah.
Bond in trouble? No, not in a Bond movie.
He gets in trouble.
Yeah, and then of course we get look down underwater, right? And then there's look out. And this panel, again, Dan, you said, we've got the orange wetsuit again. Bond's wearing short white shorts. He's got the flippers and the spear gun, again, surrounded by 4 women. So he's the dominant element where the women look half his size.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's interesting.
Who are we looking out for? Right? It says look out.
Yeah.
They showed us the women, the jetpack, underwater down, look out, women. And I'll tell you, one woman in Thunderball stands out for us, and that's Fiona Volpe.
Yeah.
What she did what she did with Bond, but never switched her loyalties to his side. I mean, Luciana Paluzzi played Fiona Volpe fantastic. We just did an interview with her a few weeks back.
She was great.
Great character, and it's great to see it here in the poster.
She's the best bad Bond girl in the entire series. Nobody comes close to her.
She was fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think part of it is because she stayed in character, right? She didn't switch alliances here.
Well, she was being paid to do a job that she loved and enjoyed, and she didn't want anything to get in the way of it. And he was just Bond to her was just another man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. It makes you wonder how many other men she seduced and killed
to do her job, whatever she had to do. That's what I loved about her character, and she played it great. She was terrific. Right.
It's a dirty job, but she had to do it.
Yeah.
Yep. When we see Domino in that one-piece bathing suit as well, right? So up to now, almost all the women that are in swimsuits are in bikinis. Here, Domino, they show us the shot of her in that black one-piece.
Yeah,
So
yeah. She's always in something black and white. So
I don't know. Did they do that to try to help appease some of these other markets? But then there's a lot of cleavage in that shot too.
Yeah. But Thunderball was a great movie. The posters are terrific. Again, they tell a little different story because they're showing you panels, again, graphic panels of different kinds of things, like you said, the jetpack and so on. And you're wondering, wow, what's going to happen in this movie? So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
That main artwork by Robert McGuinness with the 4 girls around him. There's also a version where he's got the blue frogman's hat
Yes.
on his head, which is the version that I used on the anniversary edition of the Thunderball 007 magazine. I thought,
cool.
For a change, why not use, which is good, there's another Thunderball edition coming out this year for the 60th anniversary. So there'll be some surprises in that as well. Images people have never seen before.
Excellent. That sounds great. All right, we did Thunderball. Let's move on to You Only Live Twice.
Well, actually, Dan, let's acknowledge the fact that we normally talk about Eon Production Bond films.
Yeah.
There is a Bond film in between here, the Casino Royale, 1967
We're not doing that.
version. But that's actually an interesting poster.
Oh, dear.
Right?
There is an interesting poster.
Again, it's Robert McGuinness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a beautiful piece of work. The detail and it's wonderful. And I know you don't normally talk about non-Eon Bond films, but a lot of people give this film a really rough time.
Yes.
Because they, for some unknown reason, they're unable to take away the positives from it. And the music in the film is fantastic.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
If it hadn't been for Ian Fleming, and if it hadn't been for this film, the wonderful standard by Burt Bacharach, The Look of Love, would never have existed. And that's an excuse.
Classic.
That's an excuse for that film to exist on its own.
Yep.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that that poster really,
the poster's fantastic, and
captures
the album cover.
It captures the time from 1967 because you've got this kind of, I'm going to use the word psychedelic, and I don't know the right word for it, imagery all over the woman who's backing you, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, it really just says to me, this is a late 1960s UK movie.
I can remember walking into the lobby after seeing this at the first public screening at the Odeon in Leicester Square in 1967. And I really, I knew I wasn't going to see something that was going to be a replica of a Sean Connery film. I knew it was going to be silly because when you see the number of British comedians that were in it,
Yep.
you knew what you were going to get. But when I came out of the cinema, I walked out into the lobby and people were walking around sort of with their mouths like they didn't know what to see. It was so funny. It was so.
That is good.
I love it. I mean, I absolutely love it. I've watched it innumerable times.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you want a good laugh,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
sit down with a beer and some popcorn, and just let it, waft over you. It's fantastic.
All right. So we did talk about it. There you go. All right. You Only Live Twice, 1967. Again, same time as frame as Casino Royale, 1967. Now, what was intended to be Sean Connery's last appearance, of course, as James Bond, You Only Live Twice, it offers this intriguing storyline and lots of action, and one of the best sets, of course, ever built, the volcano lair for Blofeld, which was $1 million cost at the time, which was tremendous. One of the popular posters is a British quad cinema poster by artist illustrator Robert McGuinness, released in June of 67, and it depicts James Bond in a tux, holding a pistol and a space helmet from an astronaut suit. Okay, no, we are not at Moonraker yet, but here in 1967, space in real life was very popular. We were just 2 years away from landing on the moon. So in this poster, we see Bond as described and rather small on the left side of the poster. The poster is dominated by James Bond getting his bath in Japan, surrounded by 8 women who are attending to his needs. So we see the sex element brought out as a centerpiece on this poster, and we remember what Tanaka told Bond in Japan, men come first. So this poster in blacks and reds and yellows, again, blasts it right in our faces. It says, Sean Connery is James Bond in Ian Fleming's You Only Live Twice, and we love how they split the word twice from itself and into a shadow of itself to depict 2 lives. I thought that was great. And then again, it says suggestively, and twice is the only way to live. This is an elegantly simple poster, but delivers the message that they want. Sex is in this one for sure. Wow.
Yeah. Now I've got a question about there's a few different quads that have come out on this one. One you've got him in the bath. Another
Yeah.
one you've got him on Little Nelly.
Yes.
Another one you've got it in the you got all the explosions in the lair and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank McCarthy did some of the work on here, but they all have the Robert McGuinness Bond with the
They do.
space helmet.
That's the format. That's the
Yeah.
style format of the poster series. Yeah.
And what I really, really liked about the Bond with the helmet is for the viewer who read the book, you're going to look at that helmet and go, what the hell is this? Because the movie and the book, there's, I guess you
Well,
could say there's
that's
some
the sa-
corollaries, but the movie was all about a rocket.
Tom, that's the same. That's the same with all of the films, really. And most of the people going to see You Only Live Twice have probably never read a James Bond novel in their life, so
Sure.
it didn't make any difference to them.
Okay.
What's so clever about the illustration, the design of the illustration, which obviously Robert McGuinness would have been briefed, told what they wanted, is it's the same Bond, the long Walther LP air pistol across his chest. So it's the same Bond, but he's holding a space helmet.
Yeah.
So suddenly it's telling you this is Bond, but this is updated and it's something to do with space. So that's the running idea. And then Frank McCarthy did the artwork with looking into the volcano, and also Little Nelly. And McGuinness did the Bathhouse Girls, which again is beautiful. They're all beautiful. They're wonderful. They're wonderful. I mean, when you see them, at size on the wall, it's a piece of magnificent art. They're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And the thing about the premiere of You Only Live Twice in London, because the advertising campaign all over London, and these huge Mauro Farrell hoardings, all of the posters said Sean Connery is red underlined James Bond.
Yeah.
Now he was leaving that role after this film, and he didn't. The last thing he wanted to be known as was James Bond. So they were going to use the same style outside the Odeon Leicester Square for the premiere. Well, he learnt that, and he said to Cubby, "If you do that, I won't be at the premiere."
Wow.
So they had to change all the outside hoardings,
Wow.
and it says you can clearly see it when he's. In fact, you can see it on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. We got some film of the premiere. They've as James Bond, not him.
Oh.
So they had to do all that. Otherwise, and he really meant it. If they hadn't have changed it, he wouldn't have been there. Queen was going to, the Queen was going to be at the Royal Premiere. The idea of the main star not turning up for the Queen.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah, that wouldn't work. But I actually like that as James Bond because it does set up the fact that the actor is going to change. And
Mhm.
so here we've got Sean Connery as Bond.
Yeah. Well, that's what he wanted. He was sick to, by that time he was sick to death of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
the number of people that would refer to him went face to face on how are you, Mr. Bond, or they see him walking down the street. Oh, hello, James. All this, it drove him nuts
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
he
he didn't
wasn't
like that.
James Bond. He was the antithesis of that character. But the
Yeah.
point was, what people didn't realize and still don't realize in a lot of instances is he was such a great actor that he took on the mantle of this character and he made it look like he was putting on a pair of gloves. He
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
completely, and he created that as a character the same way he created the character of Macbeth when he appeared in the Canadian television version of that before about a couple of years before he made Doctor No. He was
Mhm.
he was an actor playing a part, and people didn't understand that, and it drove him nuts because to him, Bond as a character was no different than playing Shakespeare or anybody else for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, that reminds me
Yeah.
of that Roger Moore story about where he gets confronted by a kid saying, "Hey, can I get your autograph?" And he signs it Roger Moore, and the kid says, "Wait, I thought I was talking to James Bond." And Roger
Yeah.
Moore says, "I have to use this name because Blofeld made me around."
But that's typical. That's typical of Roger being very kind to a
Yeah,
little kid. But
yeah,
I draw the line when it's adult men, you
yeah,
know,
Yeah.
behaving like that. Children's fine, but when you get to a certain age, one would hope that a person would grow up.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't.
The poster we were talking about here with when they were attacking the lair and there's the explosions and everything else, it's the same left side of the panel. James Bond is Sean Connery is James Bond, all that. That poster kind of reminded me of the Star Wars attack of the Death Star poster. The whole flame thing kind of into the groove thing. I saw that. I'm like, it kind of looks like that.
yeah.
All right.
I think that You Only Live Twice is a far better film than any Star Wars film. They don't they
I'm
don't
with
do,
you. I'm
they
with you.
don't they don't do.
Yeah, I like the Star Wars, but yeah, I mean the Bond films.
Yeah,
It's a phenomenon. It's a
When
we
I
phenomenon.
can have Star Wars.
Dan, when I was a schoolboy, I walked on that set, the Only Live Twice volcano,
Ah,
and
did you really?
yeah, you can understand why it costs so much money because there's so much more of it that you don't see. In a lot of the support stanchions, there were gun racks, and in the gun racks there were what appeared to be automatic rifles all around. It's just tons of stuff all over the place that you don't ever
Wow.
see in the film.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
brilliant.
nowadays it's here's the shot. What's going to fit in there? That's all we're going to put.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you could never do that with CGI. I
Yeah.
mean, you
No.
could create something like that, but you can't trick the brain.
Mhm.
Right.
When you see that in that cinema, when you see that there's one shot in Twice where the camera is far back and it takes in the whole panorama of it. And when you see that on that gigantic screen at the Odeon Leicester Square in 1967 as a schoolboy, it blows you away. Wow, I mean, it looked
Now
great.
imagine that in IMAX.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
because the thing was they were going to shoot it in 70 millimeter, You Only Live Twice, and I've got some test frames. Well, I used them in the You Only Live Twice magazine that I did, test frames that they shot of inside the volcano, and it looks absolutely fabulous. But unfortunately, the 70 millimeter equipment was too big and too heavy, and they were going to be climbing up volcanoes in Japan, so the chances of being able to shoot in 70 millimeter went out the window.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right. Now, we've talked mainly about the UK and the US versions of posters. You mentioned the fact in Ireland they had some different stuff. Now, there's a Turkish poster from this movie that shows Bond in a tux and a gun, and he's surrounded by three bikini-clad women with spear
Yeah.
guns. And the images of the girls and the man in the white suit, who was
Mhm.
actor Richard Johnson,
That's
are
right.
all illustrated using images from Bulldog Drummond's film Deadlier Than Male. So
Correct.
interesting how that kind of crossed over there in this Turkish poster.
Well, because I suppose it's in Turkey, isn't it? It's a Turkish poster.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perhaps they're not so tightly, or then weren't so tightly constricted by what they could and couldn't do. So they thought, wow, these girls, Silva Koskina, is it Koskina, and Elka Summer,
Mm.
great looking women, and they look very Bondian because the whole film is like a poor man's James Bond film, really.
Mhm.
So they thought, well, why not use them and put them on this poster? But it's very arbitrary, and there couldn't have been any real thought behind it. It's just a case of these women look great. Let's chuck them on this poster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. So
It's a very strange anomaly, which I suppose obviously becomes a collectible like everything else. But
yeah,
it's an anomaly. Yeah.
yeah. All right. So before we get into on Her Majesty's Secret Service, Dan, I want to just comment that they did a lot of double headers with, double features with
Yeah.
Bond.
Yeah.
And so they did a ton of different posters, taking different elements from the different posters or just doing something totally different,
Mm.
showing the two movies. And so on your website, on 007magazine.co.uk, you've got some of these posters up there. Too many of them for us to get into in this episode, but
Yeah.
there's some really cool posters up there that depict how they're going to do this double feature
Yeah.
thing. And
One,
I
one,
really like
one of
those.
one of them's got a slight error on. I don't know too many people have necessarily pointed out in the past. There's a double bill of Thunderball in You Only Live Twice, and they've got three strips of black and white montage of imagery happening in those two films. But in the second strip, there's a shot of Bond kissing Tatiana Romanova from Russia with Love. So somebody didn't quite they didn't get it right there.
Ooh, someone missed that.
Oops. That's
Oops.
funny.
All right, let's get on to the last poster of the 1960s on Her Majesty's Secret Service 1969. The movie itself, I love. All right, so Sean Connery is out, at least for the 1960s. And George Lazenby is in as James Bond in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Clearly, because for the first time since Connery, we have a new actor playing James Bond. I think they struggle a little bit on the posters here. And what did they need to show? What are they going to do on the British quad and the US one sheet? The words are far up, far out, far more. I mean, like 1960s stuff there, right? James Bond is back. Okay, that's okay. James Bond is back. The dominant graphic is of James Bond in a tux skiing with a pistol in hand, followed by a woman, Tracy, skiing with a pistol in her hand, in her left hand, and then lots of snow scenes below, including one of Blofeld, Telly Savalas, in his bobsled. Other Spectre skiers are shushing down the slopes and firing weapons. The focus is definitely action here. The artist illustrators here again are Robert McGinnis and Frank McCarthy. Some lobby cards include the same graphics plus photos of Blofeld or a fight at Peace Gloria or Blofeld kissing Tracy's hand. Not much sex here, even though the movie itself depicted many sex encounters for Bond. Though there is a lobby card with two angels of death attending to Bond dressed as Sir Hilary, and there is at least one German cinema poster that has a graphic of Bond in the center with skis and a pistol surrounded by 8 women in bikinis. In the 1960s, it was a time of free love and sexual revolution in the United States, and here we have pretty toned down posters, really, for a 1969 James Bond movie with a new actor playing Bond for his first time. It's like seemed rather odd to me. Again, same graphic pieces are used over and over again in a variety of posters here throughout the series. So it seemed weird. But there is one German cinema card that shows Bond as Sir Hilary at Peace Gloria, surrounded by 9 women, the angels of death. Now, Bond is sitting on a couch and 3 are sitting with him at all, and are sitting with him.
Going with this.
Yeah, and I have to say, this is the only sexual content one there is, I think. all are sitting around him, and all are staring down at his crotch, including Bond. They're looking down at, what could
I knew
be
you
his
were going
crotch.
there, Dan.
What could be his crotch, because it's blocked out, right? And all are smiling, and all the women have a hand extended down towards his crotch, but the hands are blocked from our view because one angel of death is blocking that view. So I think, wow, what is going on here, or what is being suggested? He does have a kilt on, and we know, well, at least one angel said, so it's true about the kilt. All right. So this is about as wild as it gets, I think, for these posters for a new Bond and George Lazenby here. I think, I don't know, maybe it overcompensated for the first switch for the new actor or whatever, but yikes. I didn't quite understand their strategy here. Graham, you got any ideas?
I don't know. You Yanks are sex maniacs, wasn't that what you said?
Well, that's because they made us cover up the belly buttons.
Yes, I know. I think the UK quad, which is the superior poster of the two for the film.
Yeah.
They go on. It's punching action, but Bond's with a woman. The fact that Bond falls in love with the main character and gets married to her at the end of the movie is probably why they're not surrounding him with loads and loads of nubile women on that particular poster. McCarthy's painting again of Peace Glory exploding and all the Spectre bad guys chasing him is again wonderful piece of work. Again, McGuinness is at the top of his game with the illustration of George and Diana Rigg. They're beautiful. I've got 10/8 original transparencies on file here.
Wow.
Our camera transparencies shot directly from the artwork, under the rostrum camera. And when you hold it up and you look at it through an eyeglass, and you can see the paint strokes and such like, and the detail that's put into it. I mean, McGuinness and McCarthy were both fine art painters, and when you look at that in that close proximity, you really do understand what fine art painting's all about, because the detail, that snow tumbling. I mean, you look at it and you think, how the hell did he do that?
Yeah.
Yep.
I love it. Also, about the American one sheet, I've never liked the way they broke down the color, because on the British one, far up, far out, and far more is in red with a black exclamation mark screamer at the end. But the American one, they've broken it up in between far and up. So depending on what your color vision's like, you would read it as far, far, far.
Yes.
So the black wouldn't register. So I think they kind of, I don't know, somebody was in love with color and just broke it up. But they broke it up too much, because it does work far, far better on the UK quad. But different designers, different ideas.
Yeah.
Not always good. There you go.
All right, it's been fun, Graham. Hey, this has been great. We've concluded our discussion of the 1960s Bond posters. If people want to find out more information about you, Graham, and what you do, where should they go?
Well, if they just put 007 magazine into Google, it'll give them all the information they need to get there.
And his website is fantastic, folks. You got to go see it. He's got so much content there. It's just one of the sources of James Bond stuff in the world.
It's one of those places you can go if you got 5 minutes and you just want to find one thing. Great, but you can spend hours. So,
you spend the rest of your life, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Well, look behind you. That's a lot of your life, right?
That's right. It is the website for James Bond information that's 100% correct, with all kinds of images that nobody's ever seen before.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is the
It's
place
fantastic.
to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Graham, thank you very much. We appreciate you spending time with us today.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tom. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great. All right, we looked at all the EN Productions James Bond movies in the 1960s and did some call-outs of some of the famous posters from each of the movies. That's a wrap. If you like this, then tell us and we'll do more. This has been Dan.
And Tom.
From SpyMovieNavigator.com and our show, Cracking the Code of Spy Movies. Please subscribe to our show. Download some episodes right now. We appreciate you spending time with us. Thanks.